She provoked the millionaire boss. "You couldn't handle me." He smiled and whispered, "Wanna bet?" She shouldn't have provoked him, but she did. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime, and Selina Hayes stepped into the 42nd floor of Sterling Tech Tower like she owned the place, which in a way she did, at least the creative strategy department that had tripled the company's market value in 2 years. Her reflection caught in the polished steel doors, rich mahogany skin that seemed to glow under the corporate lighting, natural curls styled in a sleek twist that framed her face perfectly, and amber eyes that missed nothing. The burgundy blazer she wore wasn't just professional. It was armor, beautiful, expensive armor that announced she belonged in rooms where decisions worth millions were made. Morning Queen, Jasmine, her assistant, fell into step beside her, tablet in hand. "Coffee's on your desk. Your morning briefings are ready and Mr. Drake wants to see me." Selina's voice carried the kind of confidence that made people stop and listen. She'd felt his eyes on her the moment she'd entered the building. Adrian Drake had a presence that filled spaces, bending the very air around him. "How did you—" "I always know when he's watching." The words slipped out before she could stop them, and Selina felt heat rise in her cheeks. "Damn," Jasmine's eyebrows shot up. "Girl, you need to be careful with that man." Selina paused at her office door, hand on the handle. Through the glass walls, she could see Adrian Drake standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows in the conference room, phone pressed to his ear. Even from a distance, he commanded attention. 6'3" of perfectly tailored authority, dark hair that looked like he'd run his fingers through it, and a jawline that could cut glass. He turned and their eyes met through the glass. The air shifted. Adrian Drake was 38 and had built an empire by never losing control, never showing weakness, never letting anyone see him sweat. But when Selina Hayes looked at him like that, like she could see straight through his carefully constructed walls, his pulse quickened in ways that had nothing to do with quarterly reports. He ended his call without breaking eye contact. "Careful?" Selina murmured, still holding his gaze. "Where's the fun in that?" She pushed into her office, and Adrian couldn't help the slight smile that curved his lips. Selina Hayes was brilliant, beautiful, and completely unimpressed by his money or his title. She challenged him in meetings, called him out when he was being unreasonable, and somehow made every conversation feel like a chess match where both players were enjoying the game. It was intoxicating and terrifying. 20 minutes later, Selina knocked on his office door. She didn't wait for permission before entering, another thing about her that kept him on his toes. "You wanted to see me." She settled into the chair across from his desk with fluid grace, crossing her legs and fixing him with those amber eyes that seemed to see everything. "The Henderson campaign," Adrian said, sliding a folder across his mahogany desk. "I want you to lead it." Selina raised an eyebrow. "The $10 million account that everyone said was impossible? The same one?" She leaned forward, and Adrian caught a hint of her perfume, something warm and spicy that made him think of late nights and whispered confessions. Focused Drake. "Why me?" "Because you don't accept impossible." His voice dropped lower than he intended. "You see challenges where others see walls." The silence stretched between them, charged with something neither was willing to name. "You know," Selina said, tilting her head with a smile that was part mischief, part challenge, "most people find me overwhelming." "I'm not most people." "No," she agreed, studying him with those penetrating eyes. "You're not." She stood to leave, but turned back at the door. The afternoon light streaming through his windows caught her profile, and Adrian's breath hitched. "Mr. Drake." "Adrian," he corrected automatically. After 2 years, the formality felt ridiculous. "Adrian," she repeated, and his name sounded different in her voice, warmer, more intimate. "Thank you for the opportunity. I won't disappoint." "You never do." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Selina's pulse fluttered at her throat, and Adrian found himself memorizing the way she looked in that moment, confident and vulnerable all at once. "I should go," she said softly. "You should." But neither of them moved. The tension in the room was thick enough to touch, electric and alive. Adrian gripped the edge of his desk, fighting the urge to stand, to cross the room, to finally close the distance that had been killing him for months. Instead, he watched her leave. The door clicked shut behind her, and Adrian exhaled slowly. Selina Hayes was going to be his downfall. He'd known that from the moment she'd walked into her job interview 2 years ago and proceeded to redesign his company's entire marketing strategy on his whiteboard. What he hadn't expected was how much he'd want to fall. Outside his office, Selina leaned against the wall, pressing her hand to her chest, where her heart was doing things that had nothing to do with quarterly reports or campaign strategies. She was in trouble, big trouble, because somewhere between challenging him in meetings and catching him watching her when he thought she wasn't looking, she'd done the one thing she'd sworn she'd never do. She'd fallen for her boss. And tonight's corporate dinner was going to change everything. The moment she said those words, she knew there was no going back. The grand ballroom of the Meridian Hotel buzzed with the kind of energy that only came from mixing ambition, champagne, and quarterly bonuses. Crystal chandeliers cast golden light over New York's tech elite, all gathered for Sterling Tech's annual investor dinner. Selina adjusted the strap of her midnight blue dress, a piece that hugged her curves like liquid silk and made her feel invincible. She'd chosen it specifically because it was elegant enough for the boardroom and dangerous enough to make certain CEOs lose their train of thought. "You look like you're planning something," came a familiar voice behind her. She turned to find Adrian approaching, and her breath caught. He'd traded his usual business suit for a black tuxedo that fit him like it had been sewn directly onto his body. The crisp white shirt made his dark hair look richer, his green eyes more intense. "I'm always planning something," she replied, accepting the champagne flute he offered. Their fingers brushed during the exchange, and electricity shot up her arm. "That's what worries me." They stood at the edge of the crowd, watching investors schmooze and competitors size each other up. But Selina was acutely aware of Adrian beside her, the way he commanded space without trying, how other people seemed to gravitate toward him, like he had his own magnetic field. "Table 7, he murmured, nodding toward their assigned seats. "Try not to traumatize any board members tonight." "Where's the fun in that?" Adrian's laugh was low and rich, the kind of sound that made her want to hear it again. "Fun isn't typically the goal at these things. Maybe that's your problem." He raised an eyebrow. "I have problems?" "Everyone has problems, Adrian. The question is whether you're brave enough to admit them." Something shifted in his expression, a crack in that perfect control. "And what problems do you think I have?" Selina sipped her champagne, studying him over the rim. "You're too controlled, too careful. You've built such high walls around yourself that you've forgotten what it feels like to be spontaneous. Spontaneity is overrated." "Is it?" She stepped closer, close enough to catch his cologne, something expensive and masculine that made her think of whiskey and midnight conversations. "When was the last time you did something just because it felt good?" Adrian's jaw tightened, almost imperceptibly. "I didn't build a billion-dollar company by following impulses." "No," she agreed, "but you might be missing out on the best parts of life." Before he could respond, the dinner chimes sounded, and they made their way to table 7. Adrian pulled out her chair, ever the gentleman, and Selina caught the way his hand lingered just a moment too long on her shoulder. The dinner progressed through its predictable stages, appetizers accompanied by small talk, main courses with business discussions, and dessert with carefully orchestrated networking. But underneath the surface politeness, Selina felt the tension building between her and Adrian, like a storm about to break. "The Henderson campaign," she was saying to the table, gesturing with her dessert fork, "requires us to think beyond traditional demographics. We're not just selling a product, we're selling a feeling, an aspiration." Adrian watched her speak, completely captivated. She was magnificent when she was passionate about work. Her eyes lit up, her voice carried conviction, and she commanded attention without demanding it. "Ambitious," commented Robert Thorne, head of investments, "but can you deliver results or just pretty presentations?" The question hung in the air like a challenge, and Selina's smile sharpened to a blade's edge. "I don't make promises I can't keep, Mr. Thorne. Unlike some people at this table, I actually finish what I start." Adrian nearly choked on his wine. She was magnificent and terrifying, and he was completely out of his depth. "Confident," Thorne continued. "Perhaps too confident." "Confidence isn't the problem," Selina replied smoothly. "Underestimation is." That's when she turned to Adrian, and something dangerous sparkled in her amber eyes. "Take Mr. Drake, for example," she said, her voice carrying just loud enough for their immediate circle to hear. Everyone assumes he's this untouchable, perfectly controlled CEO who has everything figured out. Adrian's pulse quickened. Selina, but I bet, she continued, her smile becoming wicked, that underneath all that control, he's just as messy and complicated as the rest of us. The table had gone quiet, sensing the shift in energy. In fact, Selina said, setting down her champagne and fixing Adrian with a look that made his blood run hot, I bet you couldn't handle someone who actually challenges you. Someone who doesn't fall in line just because you're used to getting your way. The silence stretched taut. Adrian's eyes darkened. Is that so? I think, Selina said, leaning back in her chair with the confidence of someone who'd just played their ace. You surround yourself with yes men and safe choices because anything else would be too much for you to handle. Her voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried more weight than a shout. I bet you couldn't handle me for 5 minutes. The air between them crackled with electricity. Adrian's knuckles were white where he gripped his wineglass, and Selina could see the muscle in his jaw working as he processed her words. The rest of the table seemed to fade away. Adrian leaned forward, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper that sent shivers down Selina's spine. Want to bet? The words hit her like a physical force. This wasn't the polite, controlled Adrian from board meetings. This was something raw, more dangerous. The man beneath the suits and spreadsheets. Selina's heart hammered against her ribs, but she kept her expression perfectly composed. What exactly are you proposing? Adrian's smile was slow, predatory, and absolutely devastating. 1 week, he said quietly. You worked directly with me on the Henderson campaign. Close quarters, long hours, no backup team. He leaned even closer, and she could feel the heat radiating from his body. If you can handle that without losing your composure, I'll admit you were right. And if I can't, then you admit that some challenges are bigger than your confidence can handle. Selina felt like she was standing on the edge of a cliff, wind whipping around her, daring her to jump. Deal, she whispered. Adrian's smile widened, and for the first time since she'd known him, Selina wondered if she'd just made a terrible mistake, or the best decision of her life. She walked into his office like she was claiming territory. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crisp October air that made New York feel electric. Selina stood outside Adrian's corner office at exactly 7:30 a.m., armed with coffee, her tablet, and the kind of determination that had gotten her through Harvard Business School on scholarship. She'd chosen her outfit carefully, a charcoal pencil skirt that hit just above the knee, a cream silk blouse that somehow managed to be both professional and distracting, and heels that gave her just enough height to look Adrian Drake directly in the eye when she told him he was wrong, which she planned to do often. The door was open, and she could see him inside. Jacket already discarded, sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms, dark hair slightly mussed, like he'd been running his fingers through it. He was studying financial projections on his computer, with the kind of focus that made her wonder what it would feel like to have all that intensity directed at her. Stop, she told herself. This is work. Professional work between two professional adults, who definitely did not spend the entire weekend thinking about each other. She knocked on the doorframe. Ready to lose your bet, Mr. Drake? Adrian looked up, and the sight of her made his pen freeze mid-calculation. She looked like temptation wrapped in business attire, all confident curves and sharp intelligence. Confident this morning, aren't we? He gestured to the chair across from his desk, but Selina walked past it to the floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of Manhattan. I'm confident every morning. It's one of my better qualities. Among others, he murmured, then immediately regretted it when she turned to look at him over her shoulder. That smile, part amusement, part challenge, was going to be the death of him. Careful, Adrian. Compliments might count as losing composure. I'm perfectly composed. Are you? She moved away from the window, trailing her fingers along the edge of his bookshelf, because you've been watching me instead of working ever since I walked in. She was right. He had been. The way she moved through his space like she belonged there, the confidence in every gesture, the way the morning light caught the golden undertones in her dark skin, it was impossible to focus on anything else. The Henderson files, he said, forcing his attention back to business. I've prepared a comprehensive briefing. Good. Selina settled into the chair across from his desk, crossing her legs with fluid grace. But first, let's establish some ground rules. Adrian raised an eyebrow. You want to set rules for me in my own office. Our office, she corrected smoothly. For the next week, this is a partnership. Equal partners don't hide behind hierarchy. Equal? Adrian's voice carried a dangerous edge. This is still my company, Selina, and this is still my expertise. She leaned forward, amber eyes sparkling with challenge. You want to win this bet? Then you need to let me work the way I work best. No micromanaging, no second-guessing every decision. The tension in the room ratcheted up several degrees. Adrian studied her face, looking for cracks in her confidence, some sign that being alone with him affected her the way being alone with her was affecting him. He found nothing but steady determination. Fine, he said quietly. Equal partners. Excellent. Selina's smile was triumphant. Now, show me what you've got. The next 3 hours passed in a blur of strategy sessions, market analysis, and creative brainstorming. And Adrian discovered something unsettling. Selina Hayes was even more brilliant up close. She didn't just think outside the box, she completely redefined what the box could be. Traditional luxury marketing focuses on exclusivity, she was saying, pacing in front of his whiteboard with an energy that was magnetic. But Henderson Industries makes products that are luxury accessible. We need to create desire without intimidation. Adrian watched her sketch out concepts, completely captivated by the way her mind worked. She moved between analytical thinking and creative leaps with seamless grace, building strategies that were both innovative and practical. You're staring again, she said without turning around. I'm observing, he corrected. There's a difference. Is there? She capped her marker and turned to face him. What exactly are you observing? The question hung between them, loaded with implications neither was ready to address. Your process, Adrian said carefully. It's unconventional. Unconventional gets results. So, I'm learning. There was something different in his voice, a note of genuine admiration that made Selina's pulse quicken. She'd worked with Adrian for 2 years, but this was the first time she'd seen him truly engaged with the creative process, rather than just analyzing the outcomes. Lunch? He said suddenly, glancing at his watch. We should eat. I don't usually stop for lunch when I'm working. Another rule we need to establish. Adrian stood, reaching for his jacket. I don't function well on empty stomach, and neither do you. How do you know how I function? He paused by the door, looking back at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. I pay attention, Selina. More than you realize. They ended up at a small bistro 3 blocks from the office, sitting across from each other at a table by the window. The lunch crowd provided enough ambient noise to make their conversation feel private, intimate in a way that had nothing to do with the restaurant's dim lighting. Tell me something, Selina said, twirling pasta around her fork. When you're not being a CEO, what do you actually enjoy? Adrian paused, wine glass halfway to his lips. What kind of question is that? A personal one. We're partners for the week, remember? I want to know who I'm working with. You know who you're working with, Adrian Drake, CEO of Sterling Tech. That's not who you are, she said softly. That's what you do. The distinction hit him harder than it should have. When was the last time someone had asked him about himself rather than his company? When was the last time he'd thought about himself as separate from his professional identity? I restore classic cars, he admitted quietly. In my garage at home. There's something about taking something broken and making it perfect again. That's beautiful, Selina said, and her voice held genuine warmth. What else? I read philosophy, history, fiction when I have time. I cook, badly, but I keep trying. He met her eyes. Your turn. Selina smiled, the first completely unguarded expression he'd seen from her all day. I paint. Abstract watercolors that probably look like accidents to most people, but they make sense to me. I volunteer at the literacy center in my neighborhood every Saturday morning, and I make the world's best banana bread, though I'll never admit the secret ingredient. Which is? Nice try. They talked through the rest of lunch, about books, art, travel dreams, childhood memories, casual conversation that somehow felt more intimate than any business meeting they'd ever shared. By the time they returned to the office, something had shifted between them. The professional boundaries were still there, but they'd become more permeable, allowing glimpses of the people beneath the titles. Back to work? Adrian asked, as they rode the elevator to the 42nd floor. Back to work, Selina agreed. But when their hands brushed reaching for the elevator buttons, neither pulled away immediately. The afternoon brought new challenges. They disagreed on target demographics, argued over budget allocation, and nearly came to blows over the creative direction. But instead of the polite corporate disagreements Adrian was used to, these felt real, passionate, alive. "You're being stubborn," Selina said, pointing at the proposal he'd just marked up with red ink. "I'm being practical." "Practical is just another word for scared." Adrian's head snapped up. "Excuse me? You heard me." She moved around his desk, invading his space in a way that made his pulse spike. "Every time we get close to something innovative, something that might actually change the game, you pull back. You default to safe. Safe built this company, and bold will take it to the next level." She leaned down, bracing her hands on his desk, bringing her face closer to his. "The question is, are you brave enough to trust me?" The air between them crackled with tension that had nothing to do with marketing strategies. Adrian could smell her perfume, see the gold flecks in her amber eyes, count the individual lashes framing them. "I don't trust easily," he said quietly. "I know," she whispered, "but maybe it's time you tried." For a moment, the world narrowed to just the two of them, the space between them charged with possibility. Then Selina straightened, professional mask sliding back into place. "Think about it," she said, gathering her materials. "I'll see you tomorrow morning." She walked out, leaving Adrian alone with his racing pulse and the lingering scent of her perfume. Day 1 of 7, and he was already in trouble. She was winning, and they both knew it. Tuesday arrived with rain drumming against the windows of Sterling Tech Tower, the kind of grey morning that made the office feel smaller, more intimate. Selina had arrived early, 6:45 a.m. to be exact, partly to get a head start on the Henderson presentation, but mostly because she'd barely slept. Every time she'd closed her eyes, she'd seen Adrian's face from yesterday afternoon, the way he'd looked at her when she'd leaned across his desk, the hunger that had flickered in his green eyes before he'd shuttered it behind professional courtesy. She was playing with fire, and the smart thing would be to step back. But Selina Hayes had never been particularly smart when it came to backing down from a challenge. "You're here early." His voice made her jump, coffee sloshing dangerously close to the rim of her mug. Adrian stood in the doorway of the conference room she'd commandeered, looking rumpled and tired, and somehow even more attractive than usual. "Couldn't sleep," she admitted, before she could stop herself. "Neither could I." The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Adrian moved into the room, setting his own coffee on the table, and Selina tried not to notice how his shirt stretched across his shoulders, how his hair was still damp from the shower. "The Henderson presentation," she said, forcing her attention back to the laptop screen. "I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday, about trust, about being brave." She pulled up the mock-up she'd been working on since 5 a.m. "Look at this." Adrian moved behind her chair to see the screen, and suddenly he was there, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body, catch the scent of his cologne mixed with something uniquely him. "It's—" He paused, studying the images. "Bold. Too bold? Maybe." His voice was quiet, thoughtful. "But maybe that's exactly what we need." Selina turned in her chair to look at him and found his face much closer than she'd expected. Close enough to see the flecks of gold in his green eyes, the barely visible scar along his jawline, the way his pupils dilated slightly when her tongue darted out to wet her lower lip. "Adrian." "Ms. Hayes?" Jasmine's voice cut through the tension like a knife. "The morning briefing materials you requested." Adrian stepped back so quickly he nearly knocked over his coffee, and Selina felt the loss of his presence like a physical ache. "Thank you, Jasmine," Selina managed, accepting the folder without taking her eyes off Adrian's face. "Could you reschedule my 10 o'clock? Mr. Drake and I have some details to work through." "Of course." Jasmine glanced between them, eyebrows raised slightly, then discreetly backed out of the room. The silence stretched taut. "We should—" Adrian started. "Focus on work," Selina finished. "Absolutely." But neither of them moved. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," Adrian said quietly. "Making what harder?" "This." He gestured between them, pretending there's nothing happening here. Selina's heart hammered against her ribs. "Is there something happening here?" Adrian's laugh was rough, frustrated. "Don't do that." Do what? Play innocent. We both know exactly what's happening. She stood slowly, moving around the table until she was close enough to touch him. Then why don't you tell me what you think is happening? Adrian's hands clenched at his sides. I think, he said carefully, that we're two adults who work together and need to maintain professional boundaries. Is that what you think? Selina stepped closer, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. Or is that what you think you should think? Selina. Her name was a warning. Answer the question, Adrian. What do you think is happening between us? He stared down at her, jaw working, control fraying visibly at the edges. I think you're going to be the end of me. The admission hit her like a physical blow, raw honesty that made her chest tight and her pulse race. Good, she whispered, because you're already the beginning of mine. The air between them crackled with electricity, with want, with the weight of words that couldn't be taken back. Adrian's hands twitched like he was fighting the urge to reach for her. We can't, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Can't what? This, whatever this is. We work together, Selina. I'm your boss. You're my partner, she corrected. For this week, remember? Equal partners. That's not how the world works. Then maybe the world needs to change. She reached up, fingers barely grazing his tie, and felt him suck in a sharp breath. Maybe we need to change it. If we cross this line... What line? Her fingers traveled up his tie to his collar. The imaginary line that says we can't feel what we're feeling. The line that pretends chemistry doesn't exist just because it's inconvenient. Adrian's control was hanging by a thread, and they both knew it. His hands came up to circle her wrists, but instead of pulling her away, he held her there. You don't understand what you're asking for, he said roughly. Don't I? Her voice was steady. Sure. I'm not some naive intern, Adrian. I'm a grown woman who knows exactly what she wants. And what do you want? The question hung in the air between them, loaded with possibility and danger. You, she said simply. All of you. Not just the CEO, not just the controlled facade you show the world. I want the man who restores broken cars and reads philosophy and can't cook to save his life but keeps trying anyway. Adrian's grip on her wrists tightened. Selina. I want the man who pays attention to things he doesn't have to notice, who remembers how I take my coffee and which projects make my eyes light up. I want the man who's brave enough to build an empire but terrified of letting someone see him without his armor. Each word hit him like a physical blow, stripping away layers of protection he'd spent years building. You don't know what you're saying. I know exactly what I'm saying. Her voice dropped to a whisper. The question is, are you brave enough to hear it? For a long moment they stood frozen, balanced on the edge of something that would change everything. Adrian's thumb traced across her pulse point, feeling the rapid beat of her heart. Then his phone rang. The spell shattered. Adrian dropped his hands and stepped back, running fingers through his hair as he answered the call with professional efficiency that felt like a slap. Drake. Yes, I can be there in 20 minutes. No, reschedule the Henderson meeting for this afternoon. He hung up and looked at Selina, who had wrapped her arms around herself like armor. I have to go, he said quietly. Board emergency. Of course you do. Selina, go. Her voice was steady, but he could see the hurt she was trying to hide. We both have work to do. Adrian hesitated at the door. This conversation isn't over, she finished, meeting his eyes directly. Not even close. He left without another word, and Selina sank into her chair, pressing her palms to her flushed cheeks. Day 2 of 7, and she was already in deeper than she'd planned. Through the glass walls of the conference room, she could see Adrian in the elevator, straightening his tie, rebuilding his professional mask, but she'd seen the cracks. She'd felt his hands shake when he touched her. Adrian Drake could run from this conversation, but he couldn't run from what was building between them. And she had 5 more days to prove it. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jasmine. Girl, whatever just happened in that room, the entire floor felt it. You okay? Selina typed back. More than okay. I'm winning, even if it felt like losing. He came back looking for a fight, but found something else entirely. Wednesday evening, 8:47 p.m. The Sterling Tech building was nearly empty, just the hum of computers and the distant sound of the cleaning crew making their rounds. Selina sat alone in the conference room, surrounded by campaign materials, her laptop screen casting a blue glow across her concentrated face. She'd been avoiding Adrian all day. Not obviously, she was too professional for that, but she'd timed her meetings carefully, taken lunch at her desk, and managed to communicate entirely through emails and Jasmine. Because every time she thought about yesterday morning, about the way he'd looked at her when she'd touched his tie, her concentration scattered like leaves in the wind. The sound of footsteps in the corridor made her look up. Through the glass walls, she could see Adrian approaching, jacket discarded, sleeves rolled up, tie loosened around his neck. He looked tired and frustrated, and absolutely devastating. So much for avoiding him. He knocked once on the doorframe before entering, and the simple courtesy somehow made everything worse. Yesterday he would have just walked in. Yesterday, before she'd told him she wanted him, and he'd looked at her like she was everything he'd ever wanted and couldn't have. "Working late," he observed, settling into the chair across from her. "So are you." Board meeting ran long. He rubbed his temples, and she could see the tension in his shoulders, the weight of decisions that affected thousands of jobs. "How's the Henderson presentation coming?" "It's done." Adrian's head snapped up. "Done? Want to see?" She turned her laptop around, and for the next 20 minutes she walked him through what she'd created. It was brilliant. Innovative without being reckless, bold without being irresponsible. It was exactly what Henderson Industries needed, and exactly what Sterling Tech could deliver. It was perfect. "Selena," Adrian said quietly when she finished, "this is good. This is going to change everything." He met her eyes across the laptop screen. "For the company. For us." The weight of his words settled between them. Success on this scale would mean promotions, recognition, new opportunities. It would also mean working together more closely, more often, with this thing between them growing stronger every day. "Are you ready for that?" she asked. "I don't know." The honesty in his voice surprised them both. "Are you?" Instead of answering, she closed the laptop and leaned back in her chair, studying his face in the dim light from the corridor. "You've been avoiding me today," she said. "I've been busy." "So have I." She smiled slightly. "Hasn't stopped me from thinking about you every 5 minutes." Adrian's breath caught. "Selena, yesterday morning," she continued, "when you left to deal with your board emergency, I sat in this room for an hour, trying to convince myself that what happened between us was just adrenaline, just the heat of the moment. And I realized I was lying to myself." She stood, moving around the table toward him. "I've been thinking about you for months, Adrian. Long before this bet, long before this week. You want to know why I really provoked you at that dinner?" Adrian watched her approach, every muscle in his body tense. "Tell me." "Because I was tired of pretending I didn't feel anything." She stopped in front of his chair, close enough to see the rapid pulse at his throat. "Tired of professional smiles and careful distance. Tired of wanting someone who seemed determined to keep me at arm's length. Selena." Her name was barely a whisper. "So I threw down a challenge, thinking maybe if I could get under your skin, I could figure out if what I was feeling was real or just wishful thinking." Adrian's hands gripped the arms of his chair. "And what did you figure out?" "That it's real." She reached out, fingers tracing the edge of his collar where she'd touched him yesterday. "That it's mutual, and that you're absolutely terrified of it." "I'm not terrified." "No." Her hand moved to his chest, palm flat against his heart. Even through his shirt she could feel it racing. "Then why are you running?" "I'm not running. You disappeared for 12 hours yesterday. You've communicated entirely through email today. You won't look at me for more than 5 seconds at a time." Her voice was gentle but relentless. "If that's not running, what is it?" Adrian stared up at her, jaw working, defenses crumbling one by one. "It's self-preservation," he said finally. "From what?" "From you." The words came out rough, torn from somewhere deep inside. "From the way you make me feel like I'm coming apart at the seams. From the way you look at me like you can see straight through every wall I've ever built." Selena's heart clenched at the raw honesty in his voice. "And that scares you?" "It terrifies me," he admitted. "I've spent 15 years building this company, this life, this version of myself that works, that succeeds, that doesn't need anyone. But then you walked into that job interview 2 years ago and redesigned my entire marketing strategy in 15 minutes, and I knew I was in trouble." Her hand was still on his chest, and she could feel his heart hammering against her palm. "What kind of trouble?" "The kind where I started looking forward to Monday mornings because it meant I'd see you." The kind where I found excuses to walk past your office just to hear you laugh with your team. The kind where I noticed everything. How you take your coffee, which projects light you up, the way you bite your lip when you're concentrating. Each confession hit her like a physical blow, stripping away her own carefully constructed defenses. Adrian, I know it's wrong, he continued, voice getting rougher. I know it's complicated and messy, and could destroy both our careers. But I can't stop thinking about you, Selena. I can't stop wondering what it would feel like to kiss you, to hold you, to wake up next to you and not have to pretend I don't care. The air between them crackled with electricity. Selena's hand slid from his chest to cup his face, thumb tracing the line of his jaw. Then stop pretending, she whispered. For a moment, they were frozen, balanced on the edge of everything. Adrian's hands came up to cover hers, holding her palm against his face, like it was the most precious thing in the world. If we do this, he said quietly, there's no going back. I don't want to go back. It'll change everything. Good, she breathed. I want it to change everything. Adrian searched her face, looking for doubt, for hesitation, for any sign that she didn't understand what she was asking for. He found nothing but certainty. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he stood. His hands slid into her hair, tilting her face up to his, and for a heartbeat they just breathed the same air. Hearts racing, the world narrowed to this moment, this choice, this leap of faith. Selena, he whispered, her name a prayer, a question, a promise. Yes, she answered, and it was all the permission he needed. Adrian kissed her like he'd been drowning and she was air. Gentle at first, almost reverent, then deeper when she melted against him, her hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer. She tasted like coffee and possibility, like every risk he'd ever been too afraid to take. Her lips were soft and demanding, giving as much as they took, and when she made a small sound of pleasure in the back of her throat, Adrian felt the last of his control slip away. The kiss deepened, became something desperate and hungry and perfect. Years of careful distance, months of wondering, days of building tension, all of it poured into this moment, this connection that felt like coming home and jumping off a cliff at the same time. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. We're in trouble, he whispered. Selena smiled, her hand still fisted in his shirt. The best kind of trouble. Outside, the city sparkled in the darkness, and somewhere in the distance thunder rumbled with the promise of storms to come. But for now, in this moment, they were exactly where they belonged. Everything had changed, and nothing would ever be the same. Thursday morning arrived with golden sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Adrian's office, painting everything in warm, honeyed light. Selena stood at those same windows where she'd positioned herself on Monday morning, but the woman reflected in the glass was different now. She could still feel Adrian's kiss on her lips, still taste the coffee and promises they'd shared in the darkness of the conference room. Her fingers traced her mouth unconsciously, remembering the way he'd held her face like she was something precious, something worth fighting for. Second thoughts? His voice made her turn, and there he was, leaning against the doorframe, coffee in hand, watching her with an expression she'd never seen before, softer somehow, more open, like the walls he'd spent years building had developed windows. About last night? She moved toward him, noting the way his eyes tracked her movement, the way his grip tightened on his coffee mug. Not even one. Relief flickered across his features. Good, because I've been standing in that hallway for 10 minutes, trying to figure out how to walk into this room without making everything awkward. And how's that working out for you? Terribly. Adrian's smile was rueful, boyish, in a way that made her chest tight. Apparently kissing my brilliant business partner has left me completely incapable of normal human interaction. Selena laughed, the sound bright and genuine. Your brilliant business partner, huh? Among other things. The weighted silence stretched between them, full of possibilities and unspoken questions. Adrian set his coffee on the desk and moved closer, but stopped just out of reach, close enough to touch, far enough to maintain plausible deniability if someone walked by. We should talk, he said quietly. Should we? Selena tilted her head, studying his face, because talking feels like it might lead to overthinking, and overthinking feels like it might lead to you running away again. I'm not running. No, she agreed, stepping closer until she could see the gold flecks in his green eyes. "You're not, but you're thinking very loudly about all the reasons why last night was a mistake." Adrian's jaw worked. "Wasn't it? Was it?" She reached up, straightening his tie with movements that were purely practical and completely intimate. "Did it feel like a mistake when you kissed me?" "No," he admitted roughly. "It felt like coming home." The honesty in his voice made her breath catch. "Then why are we having this conversation? Because home can be dangerous when you've been homeless for so long." The metaphor hit her like a physical blow, revealing depths of loneliness she'd never suspected. Adrian Drake, who commanded boardrooms and built empires, had been emotionally homeless. The realization made her want to gather him close and protect him from every hurt he'd ever carried. "Adrian," she said softly, hands stilling on his tie, "what are you so afraid of?" He was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "That you'll realize I'm not worth the risk." The words hung between them, raw and vulnerable and heartbreaking. Selina felt something crack open in her chest, flooding her with tenderness, so fierce it was almost painful. "You beautiful idiot," she whispered, reaching up to cup his face. "Don't you know you're the only risk worth taking?" Before he could argue, she kissed him, soft and sweet and sure, pouring every ounce of certainty she possessed into the connection between them. Adrian melted against her, hands coming up to span her waist, pulling her closer. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. "We're really doing this," he said, and it wasn't a question. "We're really doing this. Your career will be fine," she finished firmly. "We're both adults, Adrian, professional adults who happen to have found something worth fighting for. The company policies don't prohibit relationships between equals." She smiled at his surprised expression. "I checked, extensively, at 3 in the morning. Adrian laughed, the sound rich and warm. "You researched our HR policies. I'm thorough, among other things," he murmured, echoing her earlier words. They were interrupted by Jasmine's voice from the outer office. "Selina, the Henderson people are here for the 9 o'clock. Reality crashed back over them. The presentation, the campaign that would determine both their professional futures and had become the catalyst for their personal one. "Ready?" Adrian asked, straightening his jacket. "Born ready." Selina smoothed her skirt, then looked up at him with a smile that was part confidence, part mischief. "Let's go change the world." The Henderson Industries delegation consisted of 3 executives who looked like they'd stepped out of a business magazine, polished, skeptical, and holding the keys to a $10 million contract. Lisa Parker, their chief marketing officer, had a reputation for being brilliant, demanding, and impossible to impress. "Mr. Drake," she said, shaking hands with the kind of grip that tested character. "Ms. Hayes, we're looking forward to seeing what Sterling Tech has developed." For the next hour, Selina commanded the room. She was magnificent, passionate without being overwrought, confident without being arrogant, innovative without losing sight of practical results. She turned abstract concepts into vivid stories, made numbers dance, and painted a picture of Henderson Industries' future that was both ambitious and achievable. Adrian watched her work and fell a little deeper in love with every word she spoke. "The traditional luxury market focuses on exclusivity," she was saying, gesturing to the presentation screen where images of sleek product lines rotated slowly. "But Henderson Industries has the opportunity to redefine luxury for a new generation. Not luxury as separation, but luxury as elevation." Lisa Parker leaned forward, clearly engaged. "Explain. Your products aren't just beautiful, they're transformative. They don't just signal status, they enhance daily life. Our campaign positions Henderson not as a luxury brand that excludes, but as a lifestyle brand that includes. Aspirational without intimidation." The presentation continued, building momentum with each slide. Market analysis, target demographics, creative executions, projected ROI, all of it woven together into a narrative that was compelling and comprehensive. When Selina finished, the room was silent. Lisa Parker looked at her colleagues, then back at Selina and Adrian. "This is exceptional work," she said finally. "Innovative, practical, and exactly what we need to break into new markets while maintaining our core brand identity." Adrian felt his chest swell with pride, not just for the successful presentation, but for the woman who'd created it. Selina was glowing with professional satisfaction, and the sight of her triumph was better than any business victory he'd ever experienced. "We'll need to discuss terms," Lisa Parker continued, "but I can tell you that Henderson Industries is very interested in moving forward with Sterling Tech. Handshakes, business cards, promises to connect by end of week." The Henderson delegation filed out, leaving Adrian and Selina alone in the conference room with the lingering energy of a deal well done. "We did it," Selina said, sinking into a chair with a grin that lit up her entire face. "You did it," Adrian corrected, moving around the table toward her. "That was incredible, Selina. I've never seen anything like it. We make a good team. The best." He reached for her hands, pulling her to her feet, and for a moment they just looked at each other. Two people who'd found something unexpected and precious in the middle of their carefully ordered professional lives. "So," Selina said, her voice carrying a note of mischief, "about that bet." Adrian's eyebrows rose. "What about it?" "I believe the terms were that I had to work with you for a week without losing my composure." "I remember." "Well," she stepped closer, hands sliding up his chest to loop around his neck. "It's Thursday afternoon. I've worked closely with you for 4 days, handled every challenge you've thrown at me, delivered the presentation of a lifetime, and secured what's probably going to be the biggest account in Sterling Tech history. And?" Her smile was triumphant, radiant, absolutely devastating. "I haven't lost my composure once." Adrian's laugh was low and rich as he pulled her closer. "Haven't you? Not even a little bit." She rose on her toes, bringing her lips close to his ear. "I believe that means I win." "Do you?" Her breath was warm against his skin. "Which means you owe me an admission." "What kind of admission?" She pulled back to meet his eyes, and her expression was tender and fierce and absolutely certain. "That you were wrong, that I can handle you just fine, that maybe, just maybe, you're the one who's been overwhelmed this whole time." Adrian stared down at her, this brilliant, beautiful, impossible woman who turned his world upside down in the space of a week, and felt something shift permanently in his chest. "You want to know the truth," he said quietly. "Always. You didn't just handle me, Selina. You completely undid me." His hands framed her face, thumbs tracing her cheekbones. "From the moment you walked into my office Monday morning, you've had me completely at your mercy." "And how does that feel?" Adrian smiled, slow and genuine and full of wonder, like the best kind of surrender. 3 days left of their bet, but a lifetime to figure out what came next. She was teaching him how to live again, one moment at a time. Friday evening painted the Manhattan skyline in shades of amber and rose, the city stretching endlessly beyond the windows of Adrian's penthouse apartment. Selina stood on his terrace, wineglass in hand, watching the sun sink behind glass towers, while the evening breeze played with the hem of her dress. "I can see why you never leave this place," she said, when Adrian joined her, his own wineglass catching the last rays of sunlight. "I do leave," he protested mildly. "Sometimes. For work." "For work," he agreed, then paused. "And now, apparently, for you." The admission was quiet, almost wondering, like he was still surprised by this shift in his carefully ordered existence. 3 days ago, Adrian Drake's life had been predictable, controlled, safe. Now Selina Hayes was standing on his terrace wearing a sundress the color of midnight, and everything he thought he knew about himself was being rewritten. "Tell me something," she said, turning to face him. The setting sun caught the golden undertones in her dark skin, made her amber eyes glow like honey. "When was the last time you had someone over, just because you wanted their company?" Adrian considered the question seriously. "Define someone. Not a business associate, not a networking opportunity, just a person you enjoyed being around." The silence stretched long enough that Selina had her answer before he spoke. "I can't remember," he admitted finally. "That's what I thought." She moved closer, close enough to straighten his collar, a gesture that had become unconscious, intimate. "You've been living in a beautiful prison, haven't you? It's not a prison if you choose it, isn't it?" Her hands smoothed down his shirt, and even through the fabric he could feel the warmth of her touch. "When was the last time you cooked dinner for someone? Watched a movie just for fun? Spent an entire evening talking about things that had nothing to do with quarterly reports?" Each question hit him like a gentle accusation. When had his life become so narrow, so focused on achievement, that he'd forgotten how to simply exist? "You're going to reform me," he said, and there was something like wonder in his voice. "I'm going to remind you that there's more to life than board meetings and profit margins." She smiled up at him, and it was like sunrise after a long winter, starting with dinner. "We could order something." "No?" Selina took his wine glass and set both of theirs on the nearby table. "We're cooking, together. I told you I'm terrible at cooking. Good thing I'm excellent at it." She took his hand, leading him back toward the kitchen. "Besides, the point isn't to create a masterpiece. The point is to do something normal together." Adrian's kitchen was a study in expensive minimalism, marble countertops, professional-grade appliances, and cupboards that looked like they'd never been properly used. Selina opened the refrigerator and raised an eyebrow at its sparse contents. "Please tell me you eat something besides takeout and protein bars." "I have a meal service," Adrian said defensively. "Very healthy, perfectly balanced, perfectly boring." She pulled out ingredients with the efficiency of someone who actually knew how to use a kitchen. "We're making pasta, from scratch." "From scratch?" Adrian's voice carried a note of panic. "Wouldn't it be easier to just—" "Adrian." She turned to face him, flour already dusting her hands. "Trust me." The simple request hit him harder than it should have. Trust. Such a small word for such an enormous leap of faith. But looking at Selina, confident and beautiful and completely at home in his sterile kitchen, Adrian found himself nodding. "Okay, but when this ends in disaster, I'm ordering pizza." "Deal." For the next hour, Selina guided him through the process of making fresh linguine, and Adrian discovered something remarkable. He was having fun. Real, genuine, uncomplicated fun. His hands were covered in flour, there was pasta dough in his hair, and Selina was laughing at his completely inadequate attempts to roll the dough properly. "No, no," she said, moving behind him to guide his hands. "Like this. Feel the texture. It should be smooth but not sticky." She was pressed against his back, her hands covering his, and Adrian found it impossible to concentrate on pasta when all he could think about was the warmth of her body, the scent of her perfume mixed with basil and garlic. "Are you paying attention?" she asked, amusement clear in her voice. "Absolutely not." Selina laughed, the sound vibrating through both their bodies. "Maybe we should focus on the sauce. Maybe we should forget dinner entirely." The words were out before Adrian could stop them, honest and hungry and completely inappropriate for the domestic scene they were creating. But instead of pulling away, Selina leaned into him, her head finding the curve of his shoulder. "Patience," she murmured. "Good things come to those who wait." "I've been waiting for 2 years." "Have you?" She turned in his arms, looking up at him with eyes that seemed to see straight through him. "Or have you been hiding for 2 years?" The distinction cut deep because it was true. He hadn't been waiting. Waiting implied hope, anticipated eventual fulfillment. He'd been hiding, convincing himself that what he felt for Selina was impossible, inappropriate, better left unexplored. "Both," he admitted. "Well," she said, rising on her toes to brush a soft kiss against his jaw, "you don't have to hide anymore." They finished cooking together, moving around each other in the kitchen with surprising synchronicity. Adrian found himself studying Selina's profile as she tasted the sauce, watching the way she hummed with satisfaction when the flavors were perfectly balanced. "You're staring again," she said without looking up. "I like looking at you, even covered in flour, especially covered in flour." Adrian moved closer, brushing a smudge from her cheek with his thumb. "You look like you belong here." The word surprised them both. Selina searched his face, seeing something vulnerable and hopeful that made her chest tight. "Is that what you want?" she asked quietly. "For me to belong here?" "Yes." The answer came without hesitation. "More than I've wanted anything in a very long time." They ate dinner on the terrace as the city lights began to twinkle below them. The pasta was perfect, better than anything Adrian had ever ordered from his usual restaurants. But more than that, the evening felt perfect. Easy conversation, comfortable silences, the kind of domestic intimacy he'd never thought he wanted. "This is nice," Selina said, curling her feet under her in the outdoor chair. "It is." Adrian reached across the small table to take her hand. "I'd forgotten it could be like this." "Like what?" "Simple, peaceful." He brought her hand to his lips, pressing a soft kiss to her knuckles. "Happy. When was the last time you were happy, Adrian? Really, truly happy?" He considered the question, thumb tracing patterns on the back of her hand. "I used to think I was happy," he said slowly. "Success felt like happiness. Achievement felt like happiness. But now I think I was just satisfied, content with my accomplishments, but not fulfilled." He met her eyes. "This is what happiness actually feels like." Selina felt something shift in her chest, a settling that felt like coming home. "I love hearing you say that. I love feeling it." Adrian stood, pulling her up with him. "Dance with me. There's no music. There's music everywhere." His arms encircled her waist, pulling her close. "You just have to know how to listen." They swayed together on the terrace, surrounded by the sounds of the city below, distant traffic, muffled conversations, the hum of life continuing around them. But in their small bubble of light and warmth, there was only them, only this moment, only the possibility of all the moments yet to come. "Selina," Adrian said quietly, his lips close to her ear. Thank you." "For what?" "For not giving up on me. For seeing something worth fighting for when I'd stopped believing it existed." She pulled back to look at him, and the expression on his face made her breath catch. Wonder and gratitude and something deeper, something that looked remarkably like love. "Adrian," she whispered. "I know it's too soon," he said quickly. "I know we've only just figured this out, but I'm falling in love with you." The words came out in a rush, like he was afraid he'd lose his courage if he waited. "I'm falling in love with your laugh and your brilliant mind, and the way you make everything better just by being in the room. I'm falling in love with the way you challenge me, and the way you make me want to be better than I am." Selina's heart hammered against her ribs, joy and relief and overwhelming tenderness flooding through her all at once. "Too soon," she repeated, her smile bright enough to rival the city lights. "Adrian, I've been in love with you since you let me redesign your marketing strategy in my job interview. I've just been waiting for you to catch up." Relief crashed over his features, followed immediately by something that looked like disbelief. "Really? Really?" She reached up to frame his face with her hands. "I love your brilliant mind and your terrible cooking, and the way you restore broken things because you understand what it feels like to need fixing." "I love you," he said again, like he needed to practice saying the words. "I love you too," she replied, and sealed the promise with a kiss that tasted like wine and pasta sauce and new beginnings. Below them, the city continued its relentless pace, millions of people pursuing their own dreams and disappointments. But high above it all, on a terrace overlooking Manhattan, two people who'd spent too long afraid of wanting something real had finally found the courage to reach for it. And discovered it had been reaching back all along. Love was supposed to make everything easier, but sometimes it just raised the stakes. Saturday morning sunlight filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Adrian's penthouse, painting golden stripes across the hardwood floors. Selina woke slowly, luxuriously, her body curved against warmth and solid muscle and the steady rhythm of Adrian's breathing. This was new territory, waking up in his bed in his space, surrounded by the scent of his cologne and the quiet sounds of a man who'd finally learned how to sleep peacefully. She'd stayed the night without planning to, one kiss leading to another, until the idea of leaving had seemed impossible. "Good morning." Adrian's voice was rough with sleep, his arm tightening around her waist. "Good morning." She turned in his arms, finding him already watching her with eyes that held wonder, like he couldn't quite believe she was real. "Sleep well?" "Better than I have in years." His hand traced lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "You?" "Perfectly." She stretched against him, cat-like, and felt his sharp intake of breath. "What's on the agenda for today?" "Nothing." The word came out with such satisfaction that Selina laughed. "Nothing. Adrian Drake, CEO of Sterling Tech, has nothing scheduled for an entire Saturday." I cleared my calendar. His smile was boyish, proud. "Completely. For the first time in... I honestly can't remember how long." "And what do you plan to do with all this free time?" "Learn." Adrian's hands framed her face, thumbs tracing her cheekbones. "Learn how to be with you. Learn what makes you happy. Learn how to have a Saturday that isn't about spreadsheets or strategy meetings." Selina's heart did something complicated in her chest. "I love this version of you. I love that you're helping me find it." They spent the morning in lazy domesticity, coffee in bed, shared sections of the newspaper, quiet conversations about everything and nothing. Adrian showed her his garage, where two classic cars sat in various stages of restoration, and Selena told him stories about growing up in Chicago, about Saturday mornings with her grandmother, who taught her that cooking was an act of love. It was perfect, which was exactly when reality decided to intrude. Adrian's phone rang while they were making lunch together, and the name on the screen made his face go carefully blank. "Richard?" Selena asked, reading his expression. "My business partner from the London office." Adrian hesitated, thumb hovering over the answer button. "I should take this." "Go ahead." But as Selena listened to one side of the conversation, her contentment began to curdle into something that felt suspiciously like dread. "What do you mean they're reconsidering?" Adrian's voice was sharp, professional. "The Henderson contract was as good as signed." "No, I understand the concerns, but Monday." "Richard, that's impossible." "I see." "Yes, I'll be there." He hung up and stood silent for a long moment, running his hands through his hair. "What's wrong?" Selena asked, though she was already afraid she knew. "Henderson Industries' parent company is having second thoughts about the campaign." Adrian's voice was carefully controlled. "They want to meet with me in London tomorrow." "Tomorrow?" Selena felt the bottom drop out of her stomach. "But that's—" "I know." Adrian turned to look at her, and she could see him rebuilding his professional walls in real time. "It could be a week, maybe longer. Richard says they're concerned about some of the more innovative elements of your campaign. My campaign that you approved, that you presented with me." "Selena." "No, I get it." She moved away from him, needing space to think, to process. "Big client gets cold feet. You drop everything to make it right. That's business." "It's not just business," Adrian said quietly. "This contract could make or break Sterling Tech's expansion plans. If we lose Henderson Industries, you lose millions of dollars and market position and everything you've worked for." Selena's voice was steady, understanding, and somehow that made it worse. "I understand, Adrian, I do." "Do you?" He stepped closer, searching her face. "Because you look like you're pulling away from me." "I'm not pulling away." But even as she said it, Selena could feel herself doing exactly that. Not from hurt or anger, but from something more complex. The realization that love, no matter how genuine, couldn't exist in a vacuum. "I'm just adjusting." "To what?" "To the fact that this, us, is always going to come second to the business." She held up a hand when he started to protest. "And before you say that's not true, think about it. Really think about it. If I asked you not to go to London, if I asked you to stay here with me and figure this out over video calls and emails, what would you do?" The silence stretched between them, heavy with the weight of honesty neither wanted to acknowledge. "I'd go to London," Adrian said finally. "Exactly." Selena's smile was sad, but not bitter. "Because that's who you are. The man who built an empire by never backing down from a crisis. And I love that about you. Your dedication, your integrity, your willingness to fight for what you believe in. But it means I need to be very clear about what I'm signing up for." She moved to the window, looking out at the city where their love story was unfolding against the backdrop of ambition and responsibility. "I'm not going to be the woman who asks you to choose between me and your company, Adrian. That's not fair to either of us." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that if we're going to do this, really do this, we need to be realistic about what it looks like." She turned back to him, and her expression was clear, determined. "You're going to travel. There will be emergencies. There will be times when business has to come first, and I need to be okay with that." Adrian stared at her, something like awe creeping into his expression. "You're not asking me to choose." "No, I'm not. Because I already know who you are, and I'm choosing to love all of it." Selena moved back to him, hands settling on his chest. "But I need you to know who I am, too. Tell me. I'm not going to sit here waiting for you to make time for me in your schedule. I have my own career, my own ambitions, my own life that doesn't revolve around yours." Her voice was firm but warm. "I'll support you, celebrate your victories, help you through the setbacks. But I won't disappear into your shadow. I wouldn't want you to." "Good." She rose on her toes, brushing a soft kiss against his lips. "Then go to London, fix the Henderson situation, show them why your company is worth their investment. Come with me." The suggestion surprised them both. Adrian looked as shocked as Selena felt. "What? Come with me?" he repeated, the idea gaining momentum as he spoke. "You created the campaign. You know it better than anyone. If there are concerns about the creative direction, who better to address them? Selina blinked, processing the offer. A week in London, working together, fighting for something they'd built as a team. It was professional and personal all tangled together, exactly the kind of complicated situation she'd just said she could handle. "Are you sure?" she asked. "Bringing your girlfriend to an international crisis meeting might send mixed messages. Bringing my brilliant business partner, who happens to also be the woman I'm in love with, sends exactly the message I want to send," Adrian said firmly. "That Sterling Tech is a company where talent rises to the top, regardless of politics or conventions. And if they ask about our relationship, then I'll tell them that the best decision I ever made was falling in love with the smartest woman in the room." Selina felt her resolve wobble, then strengthen. This was it, the first real test of everything they'd talked about: professional partnership and personal connection, supporting each other without losing themselves. "Okay," she said, "but I have conditions." "Name them." "In London, during business hours, we're colleagues. No special treatment, no protecting me from difficult questions, no undermining my authority because you're worried about my feelings." "Agreed. And when we're not working, we're us. No business calls during dinner. No checking emails when we should be exploring the city. No letting work anxiety poison our personal time." "Done." Adrian's smile was growing wider with each condition. "Anything else?" "Just one more thing." Selina's expression turned serious. "If this goes badly, if the trip is a disaster, if mixing business and personal proves to be a mistake, we deal with it head on. No running, no hiding, no pretending it didn't happen. Deal." Adrian pulled her into his arms, spinning her around until she laughed despite herself. "God, I love you." "I love you too." She kissed him firmly, sealing their pact. "Now, we should probably start packing. And I should call Jasmine. She's going to need to rearrange my entire week." "Selina?" "Yeah?" "Whatever happens in London, we're going to figure it out. Together." "I know," she said, and meant it. But as Adrian made arrangements for their unexpected trip, neither of them could shake the feeling that they were about to face their first real test as a couple. And tests, by definition, could be failed as easily as passed. Sometimes the biggest risks were worth taking, and sometimes they changed everything. London greeted them with steel-grey skies and the kind of persistent drizzle that made everything look like a watercolor painting left out in the rain. Selina stood at the window of their hotel suite at the Langham, watching double-decker buses navigate the morning traffic, while Adrian fielded calls behind her, his voice sharp and professional as he coordinated damage control across multiple time zones. They'd been in London for 18 hours, and already Selina could feel the weight of what they were trying to accomplish. Not just saving the Henderson contract, but proving that their relationship could survive being tested under the most public, high-pressure circumstances imaginable. "The board meeting is at 2, Adrian said, ending his call and moving to stand beside her. "Richard will be there along with Henderson's entire executive team and their parent company representatives." "Nervous?" Selina asked, though she could see the tension in his shoulders, the careful control in his voice. "Terrified," he admitted quietly. "This isn't just about the money, Selina. If we lose Henderson Industries, it sends a signal to every other potential client that Sterling Tech can't be trusted with innovative campaigns." "Then we don't lose them." She turned to face him, noting the exhaustion around his eyes, the way stress was carving new lines at the corners of his mouth. "We go into that room and remind them why they were excited about our campaign in the first place." "Our campaign," Adrian repeated, something softening in his expression. "I like the sound of that." "Good. Because we're partners in this, remember?" Selina straightened his tie, a gesture that had become automatic, intimate. "In London, during business hours, we're colleagues who happen to work brilliantly together. After hours, we're two people who are crazy about each other, but smart enough not to let it compromise our judgment. And if someone asks directly about our relationship, then we tell them the truth," she said simply, "that we're professionals who found something special, and we're not going to apologize for either part of that equation." 3 hours later, they sat across from 7 of the most intimidating executives Selina had ever encountered. The Henderson Industries boardroom was all mahogany and tradition, with oil paintings of stern-faced founders watching from gilt frames like disapproving ancestors. Lisa Parker, whom they'd impressed so thoroughly in New York, looked uncomfortable as she introduced the team that would be questioning their work. "Mr. Drake, Ms. Hayes," said James Worthington, Henderson's parent company CEO, his voice carrying the kind of old-money authority that could make lesser mortals feel like imposters. "We've reviewed your proposed campaign, and while it's creative, we have concerns about its alignment with our brand values." "What specific concerns?" Adrian asked, his voice perfectly controlled. "The messaging feels too accessible," said another executive, Sarah Pemberton, head of global strategy. "Henderson Industries has built its reputation on exclusivity. Your campaign seems to invite everyone to the table." Selina felt Adrian tense beside her, but she kept her own expression neutral, professional. "May I?" she asked, gesturing to the presentation screen. "Ms. Hayes," Worthington's tone was dismissive, "I understand you're involved in the creative development, but perhaps—" "Ms. Hayes," Adrian interrupted smoothly, "is the lead strategist on this account and the architect of every element you've reviewed. If you have questions about the campaign, she's the person best qualified to answer them." The subtle challenge in his voice was unmistakable, and Selina felt a flutter of gratitude mixed with determination. He was protecting her authority without undermining her capability, exactly what they'd agreed on. "Thank you," she said, standing and moving to the presentation screen with the kind of confidence that commanded attention. "Let me show you something." For the next 45 minutes, Selina dismantled every objection with surgical precision. She pulled up market research, consumer behavior studies, demographic analysis that painted a picture of a luxury market in transition. "Exclusivity used to mean scarcity," she said, clicking through slides that showed shifting consumer preferences. "But today's luxury consumers, especially those under 40, define exclusivity differently. They want products that make them feel special, not separate." "That's a dangerous assumption," Worthington said. "Is it?" Selina pulled up a case study. Hermès saw a 30% increase in sales when they made their entry-level products more accessible while maintaining their high-end exclusivity. Louis Vuitton's collaboration campaigns have consistently outperformed their traditional advertising. The market is speaking. The question is whether Henderson Industries wants to listen. She could feel the room's energy shifting, skepticism giving way to interest. "Your current marketing positions Henderson products as aspirational but unattainable," she continued. "Our campaign positions them as aspirational and achievable. There's a crucial difference." "Which is?" Sarah Pemberton leaned forward. "Aspiration without possibility breeds resentment. Aspiration with possibility breeds loyalty." Selina clicked to her final slide. "We're not asking you to abandon your luxury positioning. We're asking you to expand your definition of what luxury can be." The room fell silent. Selina could hear her own heartbeat, feel Adrian's quiet pride radiating from across the table. "The creative executions," Lisa Parker said finally, "walk that line beautifully. They're sophisticated without being intimidating, elegant without being cold." "Exactly." Adrian spoke for the first time in 20 minutes, his voice carrying absolute conviction. "Ms. Hayes has created a campaign that honors Henderson's heritage while positioning you for the next decade of growth." "The budget allocation?" another executive asked. "Aggressive but strategic," Selina replied without hesitation. "Front-loaded investment for maximum market impact, with built-in flexibility to adjust based on early performance metrics." More questions followed, about timeline, creative development, implementation strategy. Selina and Adrian answered as a seamless team, building on each other's points, covering each other's blind spots, demonstrating exactly the kind of partnership that made Sterling Tech valuable. When the presentation ended, Worthington sat back in his chair, studying them both with calculating eyes. "Ms. Hayes," he said finally, "that was impressive. Thank you. I have one final question." "Of course. How do we know that your personal relationship with Mr. Drake won't compromise your professional judgment?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Selina felt Adrian go still beside her, but her own response came without hesitation. "Because our personal relationship is built on mutual respect for each other's professional capabilities," she said calmly. "I don't make campaign decisions based on what will make Adrian happy. I make them based on what will get results for our clients." And he doesn't approve strategies because he's sleeping with me. He approves them because they work. The directness of her response clearly caught Worthington off guard. In fact, Selina continued, I'd argue that our relationship makes us stronger partners, not weaker ones. We trust each other completely. We communicate without ego, and we're both invested in success that extends beyond our personal feelings. And if the relationship ends, Sarah Pemberton asked bluntly, then we'll handle it professionally, just like any other business partnership that doesn't work out, Adrian said. But I can tell you that the woman who just spent 45 minutes defending your account with passion and brilliance isn't someone I'm planning to let go of anytime soon. The admission was public, definitive, and absolutely devastating in its sincerity. Lisa Parker smiled, the first genuine expression Selina had seen from her all day. Mr. Worthington, she said, I think we have our answer. 2 hours later, Selina and Adrian walked out of the Henderson building with a signed contract and a renewed sense of what they could accomplish together. We did it, Selina said, rain misting her face as they stood on the London sidewalk. You did it, Adrian corrected, pulling her into his arms despite the public setting. That was the most brilliant presentation I've ever witnessed. We're a good team. We're an incredible team. He kissed her then, right there on the busy London street, with business people streaming around them and rain beginning to fall in earnest. I love you, Selina Hayes. Personally and professionally and every way in between. I love you too, she laughed against his lips. Now can we get out of this rain and celebrate properly? I know just the place. That evening, they found themselves in a tiny pub tucked away in Covent Garden, sharing fish and chips and talking about everything except business. The crisis was over, the contract was saved, and they'd proven, to themselves as much as to anyone else, that they could navigate the complexities of mixing love and work. Question, Selina said, stealing a chip from his plate. What happens when we get back to New York? What do you mean? Do we go back to pretending we're just colleagues? Do we announce our relationship? Do we figure out some middle ground? Adrian considered this, twirling his beer glass between his hands. I think, he said slowly, we stop hiding. Not because we need to make a public announcement, but because we've proven we don't need to. No more careful distance in meetings. No more careful distance anywhere. Adrian reached across the table to take her hand. I'm done pretending that falling in love with you was anything other than the smartest thing I've ever done, even if it complicates things, especially because it complicates things. His smile was warm, sure. The best parts of life are complicated, Selina. Simple is overrated. Outside, London sparkled with rain and possibility, and inside the little pub, two people who'd taken the biggest risk of their professional lives discovered they'd won something even more valuable than a $10 million contract. They'd won each other, completely, without reservations. 1 year later, and she was still teaching him new ways to fall in love. The Sterling Tech annual gala had always been Adrian's least favorite corporate obligation. Too many people, too much small talk, too many hours smiling for photographers while discussing quarterly projections. But standing at the edge of the grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel, watching Selina command a circle of investors with the same brilliance that had captivated him 18 months ago, Adrian realized his perspective on everything had fundamentally changed. She wore midnight blue silk that made her skin glow like burnished gold, her natural curls styled in an elegant updo that showcased the diamond earrings he'd given her for their 6-month anniversary. But it wasn't her beauty that held the room's attention. It was the way she could make complex market strategies sound like poetry, turn abstract concepts into vivid stories that made even the most skeptical CFO lean forward with interest. "She's magnificent," said a voice beside him. Adrian turned to find Lisa Parker, who'd flown in from London specifically for the event. The Henderson Industries account had exceeded every projection, leading to 3 additional contracts and a partnership that had transformed Sterling Tech's international presence. "She is," Adrian agreed, not bothering to hide the pride in his voice. "You know," Lisa Parker said, sipping her champagne, "when James first raised concerns about mixing business and pleasure, I told him he was being old-fashioned, but I had no idea just how wrong his assumptions would prove to be." "How so?" "We've worked with dozens of agencies over the years, Mr. Drake, but I've never seen a team with the kind of symbiotic brilliance you and Selena demonstrate. Your success isn't despite your relationship. It's because of it." Before Adrian could respond, the crowd around Selena erupted in appreciative laughter. She'd just delivered what was clearly a perfect punchline to some business anecdote, and watching her face light up with genuine joy at their response made Adrian's chest tight with emotion. "Excuse me," he said to Lisa Parker, already moving toward the woman who'd become the center of his universe. "Ladies and gentlemen," came the announcement from the stage, "if you could take your seats, we'll be beginning this evening's program." Adrian reached Selena just as the crowd began to disperse, and she turned to him with a smile that still had the power to stop his heart. "Having fun?" she asked, straightening his bow tie with fingers that lingered just a moment longer than necessary. "Now I am." Smooth talker, but her eyes sparkled with pleasure. "Ready for your big speech?" Adrian's expression shifted slightly. "About that." "Adrian Drake," Selena said, voice carrying a note of warning. "Please tell me you're not getting cold feet about accepting the Industry Innovation Award." "I'm not getting cold feet," he said quickly. "I'm just reconsidering the speech I prepared." "What's wrong with the speech?" "It's not honest." Selena raised an eyebrow. "Care to elaborate?" "It's full of corporate speak about market leadership and strategic vision and sustainable growth models." Adrian took her hands, thumb tracing over the engagement ring he'd placed there 3 months ago during a quiet moment in his garage, surrounded by the cars he'd taught her to help him restore. "But that's not why we won this award." "Then why did we win it?" "Because of you. Because of what you've taught me about taking risks worth taking. Because of the way you've changed not just my company, but the way I think about business, about partnerships, about what success actually means." "Adrian, I want to tell them the truth, Selena. I want to tell them that the best decision Sterling Tech ever made wasn't a merger or an acquisition or a strategic pivot. It was hiring a brilliant woman who saw possibilities where everyone else saw problems, and then falling in love with her." Selena felt her breath catch. "You want to talk about us? In front of 300 industry leaders? I want to talk about how loving you made me a better CEO. How your willingness to challenge conventional thinking transformed our entire approach to client relationships. How the courage you showed me in personal matters taught me to be braver in professional ones." "That's..." Selena paused, processing. "That's either the most romantic thing you've ever said or the most terrifying business decision you've ever made. Can't it be both?" Before she could answer, the lights dimmed and the program began. Adrian was scheduled to speak after dinner, which gave Selena 90 minutes to worry about what he was planning to say, and why the thought of him publicly declaring their love story made her feel simultaneously thrilled and terrified. They'd been careful over the past year, not hiding their relationship, but not flaunting it either. Their colleagues knew, their clients knew, and the business world had gradually accepted that Adrian Drake and Selena Hayes were both a formidable professional partnership and a genuine romantic one. But this would be different. This would be Adrian standing in front of their peers and competitors and declaring that love had made him not weaker, but stronger. "Ladies and gentlemen," came the announcement after dessert had been served, "please welcome the recipient of this year's Industry Innovation Award, Sterling Tech CEO Adrian Drake." Applause filled the ballroom as Adrian made his way to the stage. Selena watched him move with that familiar confidence, but she could see something different in his posture tonight, a kind of openness that hadn't been there a year ago. He reached the podium, looked out at the audience, then found her eyes in the crowd and smiled. "Thank you," he began, "for this incredible honor. When I started Sterling Tech 15 years ago, I thought success meant having all the answers, making all the right decisions, and never showing weakness." A comfortable chuckle rippled through the audience. "I built a company based on that philosophy, and it served us well. We grew, we prospered, we earned respect in our industry. But last year, something happened that fundamentally changed my understanding of what business success actually means." Selena felt her heart begin to race. "I hired someone who challenged every assumption I'd ever made about leadership, about innovation, about the courage required to truly change the game." Adrian's voice carried across the ballroom with quiet authority. "Selena Hayes joined Sterling Tech as a creative strategist, and within 6 months, she'd transformed not just our marketing approach, but our entire company culture. The camera found Selena in the audience, and she felt the weight of hundreds of eyes on her face. Selena taught me that the best solutions often come from the most unexpected places. That conventional wisdom is often just fear dressed up as prudence. That real innovation requires the willingness to be vulnerable, to admit when you don't know something, to trust people enough to let them surprise you. Adrian paused, his eyes never leaving hers. She joined Sterling Tech over 2 years ago as a creative strategist, and within 6 months she'd transformed not just our marketing approach, but our entire company culture. Adrian paused, his eyes never leaving hers. But more than that, she taught me that business is ultimately about human connections, about building teams where people feel valued for who they are, not just what they produce, about creating environments where brilliance can flourish, regardless of where it comes from or what form it takes. The ballroom was completely silent now, 300 of the most powerful people in their industry hanging on every word. A year ago, I made the best decision of my professional life by betting everything on a campaign that conventional wisdom said was too risky. But the real risk wasn't the campaign. It was allowing myself to fall in love with the woman who created it. A ripple of surprised murmurs swept through the audience. I know some of you are thinking that mixing business and personal relationships is a recipe for disaster, and you're not wrong. It could have been. But what I've learned this year is that loving someone who challenges you, supports you, and refuses to let you settle for less than your best doesn't make you weaker in business. It makes you unstoppable. Selena felt tears, threatening, overwhelmed by the public declaration and the absolute conviction in Adrian's voice. The Henderson Industries campaign that this award recognizes wasn't just successful because of innovative strategy or brilliant execution. It succeeded because it was created by 2 people who trusted each other completely, who weren't afraid to take risks together, who understood that the best partnerships, professional or personal, are built on mutual respect and shared courage. Adrian's voice softened, became more personal. Selena Hayes didn't just change my company, she changed me. She taught me that vulnerability is a kind of strength, that asking for help is a form of leadership, that the courage to love someone completely can transform every aspect of your life, including the way you do business. The applause started slowly, then built to something thunderous. But Adrian raised his hand for quiet. He wasn't finished. So yes, this award belongs to Sterling Tech. But Sterling Tech's success belongs to a woman who saw potential where others saw problems, who chose courage where others chose safety, and who taught a stubborn CEO that sometimes the biggest risks lead to the most extraordinary rewards. Adrian looked directly at Selena, his voice carrying across the ballroom like a personal promise. Selena, you once told me that I couldn't handle you for 5 minutes. You were right. I couldn't handle you because handling implies control, and what we have is so much better than control. What we have is partnership, trust, a love that makes everything else possible. He held up the crystal award, light refracting through it like captured starlight. This belongs to both of us. Everything I've achieved this year belongs to both of us, because you taught me that success isn't something you achieve alone. It's something you build together, one brave decision at a time. The standing ovation was immediate and sustained, but Selena barely heard it. She was already moving, making her way through the tables toward the stage where Adrian waited for her with an expression of such pure love that it took her breath away. When she reached him, he handed her the microphone without hesitation. "I had a speech prepared too," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the ballroom, "about market innovation and strategic thinking and the future of our industry." Laughter rippled through the audience. But Adrian's right. This isn't really about business strategy. This is about what happens when 2 people decide to stop playing it safe and start playing to win. She looked at Adrian, then back at the audience. "A year ago, I made a bet with a stubborn CEO that he couldn't handle me for a week. I won that bet, but what I really won was the realization that I didn't want him to handle me. I wanted him to love me, challenge me, and build something extraordinary together." The audience was completely captivated now, drawn into the story of 2 people who'd turned professional rivalry into personal partnership. Adrian taught me that success isn't about proving you can do everything alone. It's about finding people who make you braver, smarter, and more willing to take the kinds of risks that change everything. Selina's voice grew stronger, more confident. So thank you, all of you, for this recognition, for this. But know that what you're really celebrating isn't just business innovation. You're celebrating what happens when two people love each other enough to demand the best from each other, professionally and personally. She handed the microphone back to Adrian, and he pulled her close, kissing her forehead as the applause reached a crescendo. Later, much later, after the photographs and congratulations and business cards exchanged, Adrian and Selina found themselves back in the place where it all started. Sterling Tech's 42nd floor, standing in his office with the lights of Manhattan sparkling beyond the windows. "No regrets?" Adrian asked, loosening his bow tie as he watched her kick off her heels. "About the speech, about telling our entire industry that we're madly in love and it makes us better at our jobs." Selina grinned. "Not even one." "Good." Adrian pulled her into his arms, swaying slowly, even though there was no music. "Because I have something else to ask you." "What's that?" Adrian stepped back, and for a heart-stopping moment, Selina thought he was going to propose again. But instead, he pulled out a different kind of document. Official, legal, important. "Partnership papers," he said quietly. "Equal partnership in Sterling Tech, your name on the door, your vision guiding our future, your brilliant mind shaping every decision we make." Selina stared at the papers, then at Adrian, then back at the papers. "You want me to be your business partner? Officially?" "I want you to be my partner in everything," Adrian said simply. "Business, personal, whatever comes next. I want to build a life and a company and a legacy together." "Adrian Drake," Selina said, tears threatening again. "Are you asking me to take over the world with you?" "Actually," he said, pulling her close, "I'm asking you to teach me how to live in it. With you. Forever." The kiss that followed tasted like champagne and promises, like everything they'd built together and everything still to come. Outside, the city hummed with 8 million stories, but high above it all, two people who'd bet everything on love had discovered they'd won more than either had ever dared to dream. The bet was over. The real adventure was just beginning. 3 years later, and love had rewritten every rule. The sun was setting over the Hamptons, painting the sky in shades of coral and gold, as Selina Hayes Drake stood on the deck of their weekend home, watching Adrian teach their 8-month-old daughter Valentina how to hold a wrench. It was a ridiculous sight, a baby barely able to sit up being given lessons in automotive restoration, but somehow perfectly fitting for the man who'd once been afraid to let anyone too close. "She's going to be a mechanical genius," Adrian called out, grinning as Valentina waved the tiny wrench with uncoordinated enthusiasm. "Look at that grip." "She's going to be whatever she wants to be," Selina replied, but her smile was warm with affection. "Right now she wants to eat that wrench. Details." Selina laughed, the sound carrying across the deck where 3 years of life together had left its comfortable marks. Coffee-stained notebooks filled with business plans, children's toys mixed with financial reports, the beautiful chaos of two ambitious people who'd learned that success meant so much more than corner offices and quarterly profits. Sterling Tech had gone public 18 months ago, making them both millionaires several times over. But what Selina treasured more than the financial security was the way their company had become a model for other businesses, proof that when you built a culture based on authentic partnership, innovation followed naturally. 3 years had passed since that fateful bet at the corporate dinner, and every risk they'd taken had led them here. "She still comes back to that garage," Adrian said, settling onto the deck swing beside her with Valentina cradled against his chest, but this time with peace in her heart. Selina recognized the echo of her own words from the night they'd first made love, the promise she'd made about finding peace with her choices. But Adrian had transformed it into something deeper, more beautiful, a recognition that peace wasn't the absence of challenge, but the presence of love strong enough to weather anything. "Is that your subtle way of telling me I've found my happy ending?" she asked, leaning into his warmth. "I'm saying we've found our happy beginning." Adrian pressed a kiss to the top of her head, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo mixed with baby powder and the salt air of the Atlantic. "Everything before this was just preparation." Valentina made a contented sound, tiny fist wrapped around Selina's finger, with the kind of trust that still amazed them both. This little person who'd arrived 6 weeks early, disrupting every carefully planned schedule and forcing them to discover new depths of love they hadn't known existed. "Remember when you were terrified that loving me would make you weak?" Selina asked softly. "I was an idiot. You were scared. There's a difference." She shifted to look at him, noting the ways fatherhood had changed his face, softer around the eyes, quicker to smile, completely transformed by the daily miracle of unconditional love. At 41, Adrian had finally learned that true strength came not from control, but from surrender to the right people. What would you tell that version of yourself now? Adrian considered the question, watching the last light of sunset reflect off the water. That strength isn't about controlling everything. It's about having the courage to let the right people change you. He looked down at Valentina, then at Selina. That the best decisions are the ones that scare you a little. That love isn't a distraction from building something meaningful. It's the foundation. And professionally, that the woman who challenged me in that first presentation would become the best business partner I could ever ask for. That watching her command a boardroom while 6 months pregnant would be one of the proudest moments of my life. That building a company together is nothing compared to building a family. Selina felt the familiar flutter in her chest that Adrian's words still triggered even after all this time. "I have a confession," she said. "Tell me, that first day when I walked into your office and provoked you with that bet, I wasn't just testing whether you could handle me professionally. No, I was testing whether you were brave enough to love me." Her voice was quiet, honest. "I'd been watching you for months, the way you worked, the way you treated people, the way you carried yourself like you had the weight of the world on your shoulders. And I knew that underneath all that control was someone worth fighting for. So you picked a fight. I picked a fight that would force us both to be honest about what we wanted." Selina smiled at the memory. "I just never expected to win so completely." "You didn't win," Adrian protested. "We both won. Did we?" "Look around, Selina." Adrian gestured to their life, the home they'd built together, the business that bore both their names, the child sleeping peacefully in his arms, the future stretching ahead of them filled with possibility. "This isn't what winning looks like. This is what loving looks like when two people are brave enough to bet everything on each other." As if summoned by their conversation, Adrian's phone buzzed with a text from their assistant. "Harvard Business Review wants to do a feature on the Hayes-Drake model of business partnership. Available for interview next week." "More press," Selina observed, reading over his shoulder. "Do you mind?" "I mind that they always want to know our secret," she said with amusement, as if love and respect and mutual admiration are some kind of revolutionary business strategy. Maybe they are. Maybe they should be. Valentina stirred, making the soft sounds that indicated nap time was over and dinner time was approaching. Adrian stood carefully, cradling her with the natural grace he'd developed over 8 months of fatherhood. "I'll get her bottle," Selina said, but Adrian caught her hand. "Wait, one more minute." "What?" "I want to remember this." His voice carried the kind of wonder that still surprised her after all this time. "This moment, this light, the way you look right now. 3 years ago I thought happiness was achieving goals. Now I know it's moments like this, ordinary and perfect and completely ours." "Adrian, I love you," he said simply. "Not because you changed my life, but because you helped me build a life worth living. Not because you made me successful, but because you taught me what success actually means. Which is coming home to people who love you for who you really are, not what you've accomplished. Building something together that's bigger than either of you could create alone. Having the courage to keep choosing love, even when it's complicated." Selina rose and kissed him softly, tasting salt air and promises, and the comfortable certainty of a love that had weathered every test. "For the record," she murmured against his lips, "you handle me just fine, do I? You handle me like someone precious, like someone worth fighting for. Like someone you choose every day, not because you have to, but because you want to." The sun completed its descent beyond the horizon, and the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Somewhere in the distance, waves crashed against the shore with rhythmic certainty, and closer, much closer. Their daughter began to fuss with the particular urgency that meant dinner could no longer be delayed. "Come on," Selina said, taking Adrian's free hand and leading them both inside. "Let's go feed our beautiful, demanding daughter, and plan our next conquest of the business world. What did you have in mind? Everything. Her smile was radiant, unlimited. I want to do everything with you. As they walked into their home, past the photos documenting their journey from corporate rivals to life partners, past the awards that proved they'd succeeded beyond their wildest dreams, past all the tangible evidence of a life well lived, Adrian realized that Selena had been right about one thing from the very beginning. He couldn't handle her, but he could love her, support her, challenge her, and choose her every single day for the rest of their lives. And that, it turned out, was so much better than handling anything. Some bets, when you won them completely, changed everything forever. Some love stories, when you lived them fully, rewrote the very definition of happily ever after. Some people, when you found them, made you understand that all the risks you'd been afraid to take were nothing compared to the risk of living without them. Adrian Drake had learned to bet on love. Selena Hayes had taught him how to win. Together, they'd discovered that the best victories were the ones you shared, forever. Thank you for joining Selena and Adrian on this incredible journey of love, ambition, and transformation. Their story proves that the greatest risks often lead to the most extraordinary rewards. Now we want to hear from you. What moment in this love story touched your heart the most? Share your thoughts in the comments below and tell us which scene made you believe in the power of taking chances for love. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment your thoughts. Your participation is very important to us. See you next time.